Products.
We exist to make a positive impact in people's lives.
We exist
to make a positive impact
In people's lives.
We exist to make a positive impact in people's lives. This is the Lansing Positive Impact Podcast.
Coming up on this episode of the Positive Impact Podcast, we sit down with two generations of Lansing leaders. Two presidents and CEOs who helped build and guide Lansing Building Products for 45 years of its 70-year history. Hello, I'm your host, Lansing Communications Manager Wes McElroy, and welcome to a conversation with former President and CEO of Lansing Building Products, Chris Lansing, and current President and CEO, Hunter Lansing. The great American poet Maya Angelou once wrote, "You can't really know where you're going until you know where you have been." As Lansing Building Products embarks on its 7th decade of making a positive impact, it is important to know where the company has been, how it started, and the challenges that have been embraced. And the current challenge that is on the mind of President and CEO Hunter Lansing that made him say this.
That's the bajillion-dollar question. Yeah, that is the bajillion-dollar question.
In late October, I had the opportunity to sit down in the home office with Chris and Hunter. As I noted to both gentlemen, they are two humble people who prefer not to talk about themselves. But as I said to both, there are no two better people to talk about the first-hand accounts of the story of a third-generation family-owned business celebrating 70 years. We started the conversation with Chris Lansing as I asked him to recall what he remembers about how his father, Ted, started Ted Lansing Supply Company in 1955.
Well, I can remember when he started the business, I was only 5 years old, so I don't have an in-depth knowledge of it. But I do remember that he brought in two partners. He brought in Dyke Griffith was his name, and Mac McLean. He brought them in as partners because he couldn't afford to pay them. He didn't have two nickels to rub together. Certainty Roofing gave him a line of credit. He'd lost his largest roofing distributor or dealer here. And they looked around, there's no one else. And Certainty came back to him and said, "We want to take a chance on you. If you'll bring in the Certainty line, we'll help put you in business with a line of credit, which is capital." And so he started in what I think was a wing and a prayer. We used to be open 6.5 or 5.5 days a week, and he worked a lot more hours than that. Basically, he was on the outside. Dyke Griffiths was running the operations, and Mac McLean ran the warehouse. So it was a pretty thin group there for a while. I can remember as a young boy that my mother and I would take him a bag lunch to the office, which wasn't much, especially compared to this, and because he couldn't afford to buy lunch.
As you're watching this all unfold, as you're watching all the things that your dad is doing, the lengths that he's going, does it make you want to be part of the business? Like initially, did you want to be part of this?
Absolutely. And I think Hunter had the same thing.
I did, yeah.
That before he was out of high school, he knew where he wanted to go. And you never varied from that I'm aware of.
No.
I don't think you ever looked at any other opportunities. I'm not aware of them. And he came straight into the business. But it was the same with me. It was all I knew.
For me, it was, I could tell early on that my dad was extremely passionate about the business and loved the business. And that was something that just interested me. And because of his passion and excitement about it, I wanted to be a part of it too.
Chris, let me go back. 1980, you're not only dealing with the loss of your dad, but economy's not great, country's in flux. What was your first year as president of the company like?
Well, it was challenging for me because, first of all, my dad died, and my mother had offered to run the business to Bob Safi, and he didn't want to do it. So she turned to me just because she didn't have anybody else to. And then we had the family owned the business, but we were doing the work, and the family wanted more money out of dividends. And I wanted to pour every nickel we could back into the business. Bob Safi, I mentioned his name. he decided that he didn't want to work for this young buck that obviously didn't know what he was talking about. And so he left and opened up less than a mile away, but he left with our credit manager and our operations manager and said, we are going to sink your company. And my mother was hearing words from suppliers that she knew well, just socially, saying, I don't think Chris can do it. So she's putting on pressure. These people move across less than a mile away from our old warehouse. And that was pressure. And that was probably the best thing that ever happened to me. All that pushback, it made me maybe dig a little deeper than I normally would. There are several people that say, I don't think he ain't going to do it. You need to sell the business. So she determined she was going to sell the business. And I said, great, I want to buy it. And she said, well, I've got to have a valuation on it, which she did. Came back with a valuation. I said, I'll buy it. She said, you don't have any money. You can't buy this thing. And you're right. I can't. But so we went out to a bunch of banks, and I could raise about 50% of what she wanted, which was a reasonable cost that she had given us. And I said, I got half of it. She said, I'm selling it to the highest bidder. So we had to really think on it for a weekend and come back and say, I've invested what little of my work life I have done to this company, and I feel like we're moving it. I don't want to have to walk away because I refuse to work for somebody else. And furthermore, I'm going to open up across the street from you, which caused a huge furor in the family. But we knew what we wanted and what we needed. And thankfully, my wife had more confidence in me than most. And she said, let's do it. So that's what we did. And ultimately, she sold the business to us and we were off and running. But there was a recession in 1981, right after, big recession. And we just had to soldier through it and get it through. But the good news is all the people that I had grown up in the business with left and were competitors. So it gave me an opportunity, or the mandate, if you will, to go out and hire the next generation of leaders. So that's when we got Glenda Miller. That's when we got John Wick. That's when we got several others that instead of saying, are you nuts, Chris? They say, let's do it. Let's do it.
Hunter, it's crazy to think 2016 isn't that long ago, but what has happened in the past 9 to 10 years, ask the same question I asked of Chris. What do you remember about your first year as president of Lansing Building Products?
Well, the first thing I remember, it was technically January 2nd. And leading up to that point, my dad had made it very clear. He said, I am going to physically vacate my office, and I might have a little cubicle downstairs, but your mom and I have been called to go on a mission trip for the church. And so I'll be leaving in June. And from January until June, I'm really going to just kind of not really be around to give you a lot of latitude. And he did that. And I'll never forget the showing up on January 2nd. And it was odd moving into his office, but it was totally empty. And
except for one thing.
Oh, you left me that letter.
I left him a letter.
Yep, that's right.
Do you mind sharing what was in the letter?
I hope it expressed confidence from me to him.
It did.
And then there were 10 things, as I recall, about just kind of watchwords, if you will, for any business.
Mm-hmm.
And he's embraced them and has run with it. When I left, I felt that we had been so blessed as a family, I needed to return, say thanks in some way, working for a nonprofit. And so we accepted a church mission. And I just think it worked out well.
Yeah.
And I was away from Hunter, which was perfect, so I wouldn't be breathing down his neck every day about what about this account or why. He was on his own.
I certainly missed him. And there were times that I did need him and did want him there. But at the same time, it did provide my team and I with a lot of latitude in order to be able to do and try new things. And that was a good thing. But that was all because of my dad.
But when I retired, I told our CFO, who was my age, said, you got to retire. And he didn't want to retire, but he needed to because he wouldn't have given Hunter the room to grow. So before I left, we hired Mason. And that's been as good a hire probably as you've had.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely.
He had to prove it.
There were multiple highlights in the 30 minutes I spent with Chris and Hunter. But my favorite part of the conversation was that I was able to ask two generations of leaders the same questions, like how they started, how they grew as leaders, and how they both embraced challenges, leading Lansing through major global events, like Chris did through the 2008 housing crisis.
That was tough. We had done nothing wrong as a company. We were profitable, but we had two banks then that we relied on. One bank immediately moved out. They just said, we don't like this category, we're bailing. We're cutting off your line. So I went to the other one and said, can you help us out? And they said, no, we don't like this line of business either. And so we had to be put on asset-based lending. And my wife and I had to sign that note to the bank that if the company went under, they'd take our house and everything else we own, which I was happy to do. It's not quite so easy for a wife to sign her life away in a business that she's really not that familiar with.
But here you are in 1980 doing pretty much the same thing, and now you're back in 2008 almost doing the same exact thing. You're gambling on the belief.
It's the business cycle. You know, Hunter's going to have some rough days. He's probably already had some. And he'll have more. I can promise he's going to have more as tougher than I have. And that to me is part of the fun of the business. It's hiring good people, helping them to understand what the goal is, trying to break down silos, which tend to occur the bigger you get, and loving up on the people. And I think that's what I spent most of my time doing then.
Hunter, March 16th, 2020 is a landmark day in the history of Lansing Building Products. It's supposed to be a day of celebration. It's the day that Lansing and Harvey Building Products come together. But as this is all going on, the world is shutting down with something that we've never seen the likes of, the coronavirus. And life is, forget day to day, it's changing every minute. How did you balance those early months of the pandemic and this acquisition? How did you balance it all with so much unknown being thrown at you?
You know, I don't know that I did, but we...
Honest answer.
Yeah. Look, it going back to, we've talked about my grandma and my mom, and that was a moment where, now that you asked me, you know, essentially my wife and I, for the most part, pushed as many chips as we possibly could, nearly all of our chips in the middle of the table, and we do this big acquisition, and then like literally the day that we announced the sky is falling. And I'll never forget coming home that night and my wife saying to me, I thought you said this was going to be a good idea. And the next couple months really were some of the hardest of my life, where I thought I'd made the worst mistake of my entire life. And I thought I was going to lose practically everything I had. And so I'll never forget, we would show up, and my team and I would show up in this exact room every Monday morning. We'd review the sales from the week before, and it's a terrible thing to say, but it was, okay, how many people do we have to let go this week? And that went on for about a month or 6 weeks, certainly through March, through April, and then into May a little bit. And it was a gut-wrenching thing. You know, my dad did we had to do a lot of the same thing in 2008 during the housing crisis, that the Great Recession that you mentioned earlier. But we got through it, and And then somewhere around Memorial Day or just after Memorial Day, sales we'd come in every morning or every Monday morning, and then we'd review the sales. And then that around Memorial Day, it all of a sudden ticked up, because before it had just been falling. And we're trying to sort through things like essential business and masking mandates and spacing mandates. And a friend of mine said it was, showing up to work, it was like getting dealt a new deck of cards. You just had to play the very best hand you could that day. And then you'd go home and you'd show up the next morning and you'd be given a new set of cards. You just do the best you can. And so that's what it felt like. But somewhere around Memorial Day, it all of a sudden ticked up. And we thought, okay, well, that's great to see. And then the next week it ticked up more. And then by the second or third week of June, it was just an absolute rocket ship. And it took off. And it didn't really stop until the end of 2022. It's a wild time.
Can I just say something about similar to what he went through when one bank pulled their loan, and we felt a little bit like a hot air balloon that was trying to clear the mountain peak, and it's coming up, and we start throwing things out. What we wound up doing is closing 8 branches and laying off over 100 people. So painful. That's the toughest thing I've had to do. But we cleared the mountain.
Chris, going through what you went through in 1980 and 2008, and Hunter, what you went through in 2020, in both positions, you come out, and at the end, there's positives. There's growth. I don't think a lot of people think being a president, they think of as a growth position. They think, the president should have everything figured out. They know everything. No. But having gone through what you both went through, how does it change your perspective? How does it change your outlook about life and about leadership when you get through that storm and you come out on the other side?
I certainly never thought that I had everything licked when I came into this role. And I still feel that way today, by the way. But it gives you perspective, and it gives you understanding, and it does maybe give you a little bit of wisdom in the way you think about the next big challenge that you have. And by the way, my experience from March 16th until Memorial Day was a drop in the bucket compared to a 100-year recession. So let me just say that. Very different. However, during that time, I'll never forget, the essential business, who basically the government was sort of saying this swath of business can be open and this swath is sort of non-essential. And that was one thing that we're trying to figure out. But one day, Washington State deemed wholesale distribution building product companies as non-essential. And so at that point, it was, we're going to have to shut down our Seattle branch. And we learned later on in the day that one of our competitors had decided to continue to stay open. And I'll never forget coming home that night, sort of being faced with, well, what do I do? Do I sort of cheat and do what our competitor's doing and somehow skate this mandate that Washington State had come out with, or do I tell everyone in Seattle that works for us and their families, I'm sorry, but we're going to have to shut our doors? And that was a really hard decision. Ultimately, the decision was, we're law-abiding citizens, and what do we want our legacy to be? And so, fortunately, the decision was made, and then a couple days later, we were an essential business, and so ultimately, we didn't really ever have to close the doors. But it was things like that you would go through that were so gut-wrenching, but you come out the other side, and you're it's a hard thing to describe, but you're just a stronger person, and are able to deal with challenges like that.
Hotter the fire, the harder the steel, right?
Hunter, what are the challenges of trying to grow the company at the same time making sure that Lansing still has that family feel?
That's the bajillion-dollar question. Yeah, that is the bajillion-dollar question. And, I get asked the question from time to time, where do you spend most of your time in the business? And it's actually like right where you just asked that. And that's the challenge, quite frankly, is when Lansing was a smaller business, it was never easy. It was easier to be able to know everyone's names and really understand all of the markets and the customers and kids' names and their dogs' names, all that stuff. And it's all so very important. And inevitably with size comes complexity. And so that's why it's so important that the culture, our culture of certainly respect, service, and excellence, but our culture of people and relationships, it can't just grow with the business. It has to grow faster and stronger and deeper than the business, because that's how we remain sort of a relevant, strong organization. I think folks in the company have heard me sort of use the expression, it's like the guardrails get more narrow, because as a growing business, we have to operate a certain way, and we have to follow procedures in a certain way, and we have to report in a certain way, and all these things are so important and necessary. But at the same time, our roots are like a highly entrepreneurial business. And so while I'd still like to think that we are entrepreneurial for sure, and that we do give our branch managers a lot of latitude to be able to grow and operate their businesses, at the same time, we have got to follow and adhere to operating standards and procedures. So I'm not giving you a straight answer other than I try to figure that out every day. And quite frankly, that's what my job is it's this feel of, is this the right thing for the business at this point in time? Is this going to feel right? Is this going to hit right? Can we do this later? Is this too corporate? Is this too overwhelming for our people? All those sorts of things go into the ethos of the company. And, I feel like it's my responsibility to sort of say, let's open the door for this and let it in, or like, let's keep the doors closed and let's wait on that, because we're not quite there yet. And, therein lies the challenge, but therein lies the opportunity. It's the hard part, but it's also the fun part of the business.
Chris, I'm sure you experienced it.
I did. I'm listening to Hunter. That's why he's doing a better job. That if I were here today running the business, it shouldn't be me, it's him. He's confronting these things. When I was here, particularly early on, we had a bunch of cowboys running around this place. And anything goes, and that's how it started.
I want to be respectful. I did not want to cut you off, but you said something at the beginning of that where I have to ask a follow-up. Hunter, your dad, the guy who used to run this company, just sat here and said, if I was still working here, he should be running the company.
Absolutely.
As a son, as a president, CEO, as a third generation, how's that hit?
He's not giving himself enough credit. He could step in this afternoon and do an even better job.
Not even close. I'd get lost in 5 minutes of your discussions.
All those cowboys that he was talking about built this business and did a great job adding to the culture of this business and the entrepreneurial spirit of this business. And some of them are still here today, and we're very, very grateful for them. So there's a lot to be said for all the stuff and things that he did.
What's the best piece of advice Chris has passed down to you?
There's two things. The first one is people absolutely matter, and they make all the difference in the world. Number one, and it's always been that way. And then the number two is, he's always said, look, Hunter, as a CEO, you are the one that sets the vision for the business. You're the only one in the organization that can think in those terms, and it's important that you are the one thinking in those terms and setting that clear strategy and vision for the future.
I give Hunter a ton of credit because, in addition to the people thing, he's responsible for the culture of the business. The CEO always is. He can't delegate that to somebody. And he absolutely grabbed it with both arms and has worked on the culture. which is important to both of us, but he's enhanced it. I'm very proud.
I'll leave you both with this because we talked a lot about the past. Our theme this year is Built to Last. It's a celebration of 70 years of 3 decades. No one knows what the future holds, but let's hypothetically say 70 years from today, Chris, your great-great-grandkids, Hunter, your great-grandkids, they find this podcast. They're listening about Lansing Building Products. What's your message to them about what this company was founded on, built on, and should be about?
I think that's all we've really discussed today is those themes that are ageless and not business specific. I don't think that 70 years from now, we're going to be interested in cinnamon frost roofing. I don't know, but it doesn't matter. As long as we keep the important things of our business, our culture, that's what you got to teach. You adapt the new products that were coming in. When I came in, all we sold was aluminum siding. You can't give that stuff away now. The products will change, but I hope our culture, even if it's down to the 7th generation, and Hunter and I are pushing up daisies, that the culture will stay the same because it's universal. It's timeless.
Hunter?
Yeah, so what I would say to my great-grandkids would be a similar, same message, and that is our Lansing strategy has been, it's people are the culture are the people. It's sort of interchangeable, but that's it. And in a world where we have artificial intelligence that's just rapidly developing and technology that is just moving so quickly, those things matter and they're very important. But what has not changed in 70 years since when Grandpa Ted started this business in 1955, it's people, it's relationships, it's making things personal. That is, as my dad just said, timeless, and that will live on.
I wish all of our employees, especially Hunter, knew my dad, because I think they'd like him. I think he did such a good job at getting the business started. I think maybe I helped to get it grow some, and Hunter is out there running now, a little bit like a relay race, if you would. But, my dad ran a couple laps and hit me with the baton, and I ran for a few laps, and I've done it with Hunter. In a relay race, you're supposed to be at the same speed, the guy that's quitting, the guy that's starting, and that pass needs to be made. You don't want to drop the baton. That's how you lose the race. And so Hunter's one of his major responsibilities, hopefully not soon, is to find who to pass that baton to.
Yeah.
I was going to say, you have a couple more laps to still run.
I'm still running. I'm still running, and I'm enjoying the run.
Thank you to Chris Lansing and President and CEO Hunter Lansing for their time and their candid conversation. And thank you for listening. I hope you enjoyed this conversation.